She was supposed to take the stage that night, the Apollo Theater in Harlem, a stage that had witnessed legends, that had crowned kings and queens of soul. June 30th, 1995, Phyllis Hyman was scheduled to perform. The lights were set, the audience was gathering, and somewhere in that historic theater, her name was being called. But Phyllis would never answer. By 3:50 in the afternoon, she was gone. Dead at 45, 6 days before her 46th birthday. A voice that could shatter you with a single note. Silence forever. Not by illness, not by accident, but by her own hand. This is the story of a woman who sang like she was bleeding, who gave the world everything, and who the world never quite knew how to love back. A story about talent that burned too bright, about an industry that took more than it gave, and about the silent war between genius and pain. If you love uncovering hidden legends like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to Legends, Underrated, and tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from? Phyllis Linda Hyman was born on July 6, 1949, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But it was Pittsburgh, specifically the Street Clair Village neighborhood on the South Hills where she grew up, where her voice first found its power. She was the eldest of 7 children, born into a family where music wasn't just background noise, it was survival. It was joy. It was language. Her father, Philip Hyman, was a World War II veteran. Her mother, Louise, worked as a waitress at a local nightclub, bringing home stories of singers and performers who commanded stages with nothing but their voices. Phyllis absorbed it all. She listened to jazz, blues, R&B, Billie Holiday, Dinah Washington, Sarah Vaughan. She studied their phrasing, their pain, their power. And even as a child, it was clear that Phyllis had something extraordinary. Tall, striking, unmistakable. By the time she was a teenager, Phyllis stood 6 feet tall with a presence that couldn't be ignored. She wasn't conventionally beautiful by industry standards. She was something better. She was regal, commanding, magnetic, and when she opened her mouth, the room stopped. Her voice wasn't just rich, it was lived in, textured, deep like bourbon and smooth like silk. It was a contralto that could drop down into the depths of your soul and pull you back up gasping for air. She won a scholarship to music school, and after graduation in 1971, she joined a group called New Direction for a national tour. It was her first taste of the road, her first real shot at the dream. But the group disbanded, and Phyllis found herself searching. She joined another group, All the People, down in Miami, then another called the Hondo Beat. She was learning, evolving, refining her instrument, but she wasn't yet discovered, not yet seen, not yet understood. Then came 1974. Phyllis decided she was done waiting for someone else to give her permission to be great. She formed her own band, Phyllis Hyman and the H Factor, and for 2 years, she toured relentlessly, honing her craft, building her voice into the weapon it would become. She was learning how to command a stage, how to hold a note until it hurt, how to make a crowd feel every word she sang. But the real break, the moment that changed everything, came when she moved to New York City. She was 26 years old, broke, hungry, and determined. She did background vocals for whoever would hire her. She sang in small clubs on the Upper West Side, night after night, hoping anyone would notice. And then, in 1975, someone finally did. Norman Connors, a jazz drummer and producer with an ear for raw talent, was in the middle of recording his album, You Are My Starship. He had wanted Jean Carn for a particular track, but he couldn't get her. Someone told him about a tall singer, working a club uptown, a woman with a voice that could make grown men cry, Connors went to see her. And the moment Phyllis opened her mouth, he knew this wasn't just talent, this was destiny. He offered her a spot on the album. The song was Betcha by Golly Wow, a cover of a Stylistics hit from the early 70s. When You Are My Starship dropped in 1976, Phyllis's version became the standout, the track everyone remembered. That one performance, 3 minutes and 47 seconds, changed her life. She had been discovered. Buddha Records signed her in 1977, releasing her self-titled debut album, Phyllis Hyman. The single Loving You, Losing You became a hit, and suddenly, the industry was paying attention. But when Arista Records bought Buddha, Phyllis was transferred to the new label, and that's where the complications began. Her first album for Arista, Somewhere in My Lifetime, came out in 1978. The title track was produced by Barry Manilow, who was a huge admirer of her work and would remain one throughout her career. The album did well, but it was her 1979 follow-up, You Know How to Love Me, that gave her real commercial traction. The album reached number 10 on the R&B charts in 1980. The title track peaked at number 12 on the R&B chart and number 6 on the disco chart. Phyllis was finally breaking through. She was on the radio, her face was in magazines, and for a brief moment, it seemed like everything she had worked for was finally within reach. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. In the late 70s, she married her manager, Larry Alexander, who was the brother of Jamaican pianist Monty Alexander. It seemed like a partnership built on love and ambition, but the marriage didn't last. The personal and professional relationship both crumbled, ending in divorce by 1982. And around this time, around the moment when her career should have been taken off, Phyllis began using cocaine, what started as experimentation, as a way to keep up with the relentless pace of touring and recording, became a dependency, one that would shadow her for the rest of her life. But what hurt even more than addiction, even more than the collapse of her marriage, was the realization that Arista didn't see her the way she saw herself. Clive Davis, the legendary head of the label, wanted crossover appeal. He wanted pop hits, bubblegum melodies, radio-friendly singles. He wanted her to sound safe, palatable, like everyone else. Phyllis refused. She was a soul singer, a jazz singer, an artist who poured her pain into every lyric. She wouldn't water herself down. She wouldn't compromise her voice to fit someone else's vision. And so, slowly, quietly, Arista began to overlook her. But then came 1981, and with it, an opportunity that would define her career. Phyllis was cast in Sophisticated Ladies, a Broadway musical revue celebrating the music of Duke Ellington. She co-starred with Gregory Hines and the legendary dancer Judith Jamison. The show opened on March 1st, 1981 at the Lunt-Fontanne Theater, and it ran for 2.5 years, closing on January 2nd, 1983. After 767 performances, Phyllis was magnetic on that stage. Night after night, she commanded the room with her voice, her presence, her undeniable star power. The role earned her a Tony Award nomination for Best Performance by a Featured Actress in a Musical and a Theatre World Award for Best Newcomer. Critics raved. Audiences gave her standing ovations. Phyllis was everywhere. A New York celebrity, a critical darling, a Broadway star. She was at the peak of her visibility. But Clive Davis was furious. He didn't want her on Broadway. He wanted her in the studio, making the music he wanted her to make, chasing the pop crossover dream that he envisioned for her. And while Phyllis was winning awards and receiving standing ovations, Arista was shifting its focus. They signed Whitney Houston in 1983. They poured resources into Aretha Franklin and Angela Bofill. Phyllis, who had given them hit after hit, who had proven her commercial viability, was getting lost in the shuffle. Her 1983 album, Goddess of Love, should have been a triumph. The cover photo was stunning, Phyllis draped in a silver bugle-beaded gown that weighed 30 pounds, sporting chandelier-sized earrings that became her trademark. She looked like royalty, but the album itself was patchy, underpromoted, and largely ignored. Phyllis was devastated. "I was pretty much overlooked and ignored," she later said in interviews. "There were some nice records, but I'd say Arista didn't know what to do with me." And then for 4 years, she didn't record a single full-length album. Arista kept her locked in a contract but wouldn't let her release music. They deleted her albums from circulation, prevented her from signing with other labels, and effectively tried to erase her. She was a prisoner. And during this time, something else was happening, something darker, something that would eventually consume her. Phyllis was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in the 1980s, reportedly around 1985 or 86. The weight of fame, the pressure to succeed, the rejection, the betrayal, it was all too much. She struggled with severe depression. She had manic episodes. She self-medicated with drugs and alcohol, trying to numb the pain, trying to quiet the voices in her head that told her she wasn't good enough, that she would never be enough. Her weight fluctuated wildly. She gained and lost hundreds of pounds, caught in a cycle of emotional eating and self-loathing. And through it all, she kept singing. She appeared on soundtracks, did guest vocals for Chuck Mangione, The Whispers, and the Four Tops. She toured with her band, gave lectures at colleges, lent her voice to commercials. She stayed visible, but inside, she was breaking. Stories like these are why I built Legends Underrated. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more untold legends. Finally, in 1985, Phyllis was free from Arista. The contract expired, the chains were broken, and for the first time in years, she could breathe. And in 1986, she signed with Philadelphia International Records, the legendary label founded by Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff, the architects of the sound of Philadelphia. They understood her sound, they understood her soul. They didn't want her to be anyone other than who she was. The album they created together was called Living All Alone, and it was released on August 15, 1986. The title track became one of her most iconic songs, peaking at number 12 on the R&B chart. The album sold 465,000 copies, of commercial success, but more importantly, a creative triumph. Living All Alone wasn't just a song. It was a confession, a prayer, a scream into the void, a woman crying out in the darkness, begging not to be forgotten, not to be abandoned. "I can't stand this living all alone," she sang, and you could hear the desperation in every syllable. Phyllis poured every ounce of her loneliness, her heartbreak, her desperation into that track. And when you listen to it, even now, you can hear it. You can hear her breaking. You can hear her reaching out, hoping someone, somewhere, would catch her before she fell. But she was still fighting, still creating, still trying to be seen. The album also featured Old Friend, a haunting ballad about lost love that became one of her signature songs. "I won't let foolish pride get in the way. I'll take you back whatever price I pay," she sang with striking vulnerability. It was agonizing to listen to. It was beautiful. It was Phyllis at her most raw. And then, in 1991, came Prime of My Life. It was released on June 11th, and it became the biggest album of her career. The lead single, Don't Wanna Change the World, hit number 1 on the R&B chart in September 1991, her first and only number 1 hit. She had done it. After decades of struggle, after years of being overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated, Phyllis Hyman finally had a chart topper. The album was celebrated. The critics loved it. MTV played her video. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed like she was finally getting her due. The album went gold, selling over 500,000 copies. Phyllis was winning. But behind the triumph, behind the smiles and the applause, the darkness was spreading. Phyllis's weight had increased significantly. By the early 90s, she weighed over 300 pounds, and she was dealing with crushing body image issues in an industry that was ruthlessly fat-phobic, ageist, and racist. She felt the pressure constantly. Every magazine cover, every music video, every billboard reminded her that she didn't look like the industry's idea of a star. And then, in 1993, tragedy struck in the cruelest way imaginable. Within a single month, 28 days, Phyllis lost her mother, Louise Hyman, her grandmother, and a close friend, songwriter Linda Creed. Three of the most important people in her life, gone within weeks of each other. The grief was unbearable. Phyllis spiraled. She cried constantly. She drank more. She used more. She couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't shake the pain. Producer Nick Martinelli, who worked with her on what would become her final album, later said, "She was crying a lot. She was in a very dark place. In 1994, she broke her foot and had to rest for months. Her weight ballooned further. Her finances, already strained from years of mismanagement and cavalier spending, fell into chaos. She owed money. She was behind on rent. The woman who had sold hundreds of thousands of records, who had headlined Broadway, who had a #1 hit, was broke. And the demons she had been fighting for so long, the bipolar disorder, the depression, the addiction, the crushing loneliness, they began to win. Phyllis had always been open about suicide. She believed that her life was hers to control, her body hers to leave if the pain became too much. Friends knew. Her manager, Glenda Gracia, who had worked with her for 14 years, later said, Phyllis was an advocate of suicide. It was her philosophy that she was in charge of her body because it was hers, and in charge of her life because it was hers. Her position was, if she didn't like the pain, didn't like her life, she had the right to get out of the pain. Phyllis had attempted suicide twice before, but on June 30th, 1995, she succeeded. That afternoon, in her apartment at 211 West 56th Street in Manhattan, Phyllis overdosed on a lethal combination of Tuinal, a powerful barbiturate sleeping pill, and vodka. She was alone. She had left a note on her bed. At 2 p.m., her assistant found her unconscious in her bedroom. Emergency services were called. She was rushed to St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital, now known as Mount Sinai West. At 3:50 p.m., she was pronounced dead. Hours before she was supposed to take the stage at the Apollo Theater, the legendary venue where so many of her heroes had performed. 6 days before her 46th birthday, she left a note. It was simple, heartbreaking, and final. It read in part, I'm tired. I'm tired. Those of you that I love know who you are. May God bless you. Phyllis Hyman was cremated after an autopsy was performed. A memorial service was held at St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Manhattan, where friends, family, and fans gathered to say goodbye to a woman who had given them so much and asked for so little in return. And the world mourned the loss of a voice it had never fully embraced. 5 months after her death, in November 1995, her final album was released. It was called I Refuse to Be Lonely. The title was eerie, prophetic, haunting. The album was filled with painful lyrics, raw emotion, and songs that felt like goodbye letters. Critics called it her best work, but it came too late. Phyllis was already gone. In 1998, another posthumous album, Forever With You, was released, featuring unreleased tracks and outtakes. But nothing could bring her back. Nothing could undo what had been done. Phyllis Hyman was not just a singer. She was a storyteller, a truth teller, a woman who refused to compromise her artistry even when it cost her everything. She sang about heartbreak because she lived it. She sang about loneliness because she felt it every single day. And she sang about love because she desperately wanted it, craved it, needed it, even when it eluded her. The industry failed her. They wanted her to be something she wasn't. They wanted her to sound like everyone else, to shrink herself, to play it safe, to fit into a box that was never designed for someone like her. But Phyllis couldn't do that. She was too honest, too raw, too real. And in the end, that honesty, that rawness, that realness, it became too heavy to carry. This twist shocked the world. And if you never want to miss stories like this, make sure you're subscribed to Legends Underrated. And don't forget to like the video if this story moved you. Phyllis Hyman gave us everything. She gave us her voice, her pain, her truth, her soul. She gave us songs that still, decades later, make us feel something deep and unshakable. And even though the world never gave her the recognition she deserved while she was alive, her music endures. Living all alone, don't want to change the world, old friend, betcha by golly wow, meet me on the moon. These songs are her legacy. They remind us that greatness isn't always rewarded, that brilliance isn't always celebrated, that sometimes the most talented among us are the ones who suffer the most. But Phyllis's voice matters, her story matters, her pain matters, and she always will. Rest in power, Phyllis Linda Hyman, July 6, 1949 to June 30th, 1995, a voice that deserved the world